wanted me to introduce Nancy de Laval Miller. I was going to say something, but she's just such a great person. I'll just introduce her off the top of my head. Nancy came to us to NAMI about 8 or 9 months ago, saying she'd be happy to talk to us about her experience with multiple personality disorder, or what's now called dissociative identity disorder. And I was a little skeptical. It was awfully nice of Nancy, but I looked in Wikipedia, and you have this raging argument. You have one sentence that says one thing, the next sentence contradicts what was just said, the following sentence contradicts what contradicted the thing before, and how in the world are you going to decide about dissociative identity or multiple personality disorder? So it took a long time, but Nancy's just marvelous. She was very patient with me. One of her personalities is not patient with me. But that's all right. He's a 8-year-old. Is he an 8-year-old boy?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a little mischievous and so on. But I then looked at the DSM-5, which is the Bible of the American Psychiatric Association, and sure enough, dissociative identity disorder is listed, and its symptoms and everything else related to it are very clearly stated. Okay, so that was one hurdle, but the next thing was to see if Nancy herself was for real. So I hope Alan's not getting angry.
He's getting madder and madder.
Okay. Well, anyway, so I asked Nancy, who's been really sweet about everything, if she could get her psychiatrist or psychologist who, if she could give him permission to talk to me. He did, and he confirmed that that's what she has. Now, it's a very interesting disorder, a terrible one, but very interesting. If you want to think of it this way, I'm not sure if psychiatrists talk of it this way, but it's PTSD in its most extreme. Wouldn't you say, maybe? Yes. Okay. You've suffered something absolutely horrible, which causes you to escape into other personalities, but you have absolutely no memory of the trauma that you suffered. So you're walking around doing kind of strange things. You're being a bit dysfunctional. All of these people in one person. Although Nancy managed to go to, what?
Some people are very functional with DID.
Yeah, yeah. Well, she managed to go and got 2 bachelor degrees and so on. But it was a long time before she got diagnosed, and it was a long time before she really got the kind of good treatment she needed. And I spent a lot of time talking to Nancy. She's just a marvelous person, and Alan may not like me too much, but the rest of Nancy's personality seemed to I get along with them. So without any further BS by me, this is Nancy.
I'm glad to see such a nice crowd has come tonight to find out how crazy I am. I was born Nancy Lee Burrell in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to a very prosperous family. And I had everything I ever wanted, except for one thing, my sanity. My parents hired a babysitter maid when I was 4 years old, and she came to live at our house. And she started sexually abusing me. And she wore a green uniform. And since I can't remember her name, I call her the Green Girl. So just suddenly she was sleeping in the next room. And the first thing she did was she seduced me. She cuddled me, she loved me, she said nice things to me and treated me very nicely. And then she betrayed me. And then the abuse started. And so I was already really confused before there was any abuse because she acted so strange. She did horrible things to me, and because of those things, I couldn't stand it, so I had to leave psychologically. So I would imagine I was someone else doing something else, and then after the abuse, I wouldn't remember anything. So that's kind of how I got the multiple personalities. Today I'm going to explain how sexual abuse caused me to lose my sanity and how I found it again, or at least most of it, and no, I'm not a serial killer. After I talk about my history, I wanted to go over the signs and symptoms of child abuse because that's something that I'm very concerned about.
So she'll do 2 segments. The first one is about her experience, and there'll be questions and answer, and then there'll be the second one about child.
Right, so we can possibly identify cases of child abuse if we see them. The abuse was perpetrated on my body, but I sent my mind on a vacation and invented alternative personalities to take the abuse. I endured the abuse because it happened to someone else, and I would forget it as soon as it happened. I call it self-imposed amnesia. One of the personalities I invented is New Nancy, and she is 4 years old. She has blonde hair and blue eyes, and she's a very good girl. And I believe that I formed her to perform for my mother. So she does all the good things. She tries to do everything right. And of course she would get very surprised when another personality would come out and do something bad. And my mother was pretty confused too by that time. I made up Alan, and Alan is an 8-year-old boy, and the reason he was invented was to protect me because I thought he would be better able to fight off the abuser and to run away and hide. And the abuser was huge. I guess any adult seems huge, but she was really huge. I also have a personality called the little old lady, and I'm kind of becoming her slowly but surely through time. I created her because there was another babysitter that came occasionally, and she was an old lady, but she always left us alone there with the bad babysitter. And the little old lady is very laid back and does everything slowly. And her favorite thing used to be smoking dope. But she's not allowed to do that anymore. Okay, so multiple personality is signified by MPD, and it's also called dissociative identity disorder, which is DID. Whatever you call it, I have it. From my abuse, I learned when you're in a bad situation, when things get stressful, switch. Just be someone else and it won't bother you. That's how I got 13 personalities. My mother was at her wit's end trying to deal with me because I would deny the things I had done. One personality would hit my sister, and then I'd switch to the other one, and she'd say, "No, I didn't do anything." And my mother was probably more confused than I was, but she wasn't able to handle it. She kind of distanced from me, and our relationship never really got better because she died before I was diagnosed. Excuse me. I was scared to go to school. I was very forgetful. I was confused. And I zoned out during conversations. This was especially when I got older. People would be going, "Nancy, come in." Earth to Nancy. Because I'd be out there thinking of something else and another personality was thinking of it. And it took me a long time to realize other people actually listened through a whole conversation. So I try to do better at that now. I did okay until puberty, and then when I started to experience sexual urges, I really had trouble because parts of me remembered the abuse. And parts of me needed to forget it. I needed to keep forgetting it. And so I had this war going on inside me. And I had nervous breakdowns, screaming fits, and long periods of sullen silence. Of course, that sounds kind of like a regular teenager. During high school, my parents took me to a bad psychiatrist, and he made me feel worse. He took my parents in and talked to them for 45 minutes. And then they came out, and he took me in. And he never asked me anything. He never asked me what was wrong. And even I, at 15, knew he was supposed to ask me about my problems. He just told me how bad I was. And told me that I better straighten up and be a good girl and do what my parents said. I know, I can't believe he did that. Okay, let's see what I can. I went to college and I did well at first. My first couple years were okay. And then I almost committed suicide by jumping out a 5th floor window. And I was studying one night in the dorm, and I was taking this class on English history, and I never really got it. There was so much information, and the teacher was kind of nasty, and so I was sitting there with my notebook full of stuff I was supposed to remember or learn for the next day's exam, and I freaked out, and I jumped up and headed for the 5th floor window. And then somehow I stopped myself. I think I realized I would die if I jumped out, so I didn't jump out, and I'm glad I didn't. After college, I was married 2 times, had 2 daughters, and then divorced 2 times. I felt so bad I began taking drugs. And for a long time, I existed because I was taking all these drugs. And I met hippies, and they seemed to understand me. I don't know why, but they did. So my alternative personalities embraced their alternative lifestyle. And I was pretty much drugged up for, I'd say, 4 years. And then a wonderful thing happened to me. I discovered my higher power, Jesus. And he's been my closest friend since then. And he has helped me through everything. And really, it was like someone turned the light on. All the darkness and the sadness and grief and oppression that I felt just got pushed aside. So I started to do a lot better. I felt better about myself. And Jesus brought me a 3rd husband, and we lived in Athens, and I raised 2 daughters, and I started to feel good about myself. But my husband kept telling me I needed to be consistent because I had these 2 daughters. And it was quite chaotic. So I was trying to be consistent, but it's impossible to be consistent when you're 13 mothers. Wait, Alan isn't a mother. Oh, yes, he is. Okay, so at that point, I created this personality called control. And control has no feelings. It's an it. It's not a he or a she. It's a decision machine. And control is very good at keeping track of things. So I started to be able to be consistent, and that was a good thing. And we survived a little longer for that. I even went to OU and got a BA in interior design. We moved to Florida, and I opened my own business, De Laval Interiors, which I was very proud of. However, I was in for a shock. When I was 50 years old, a counselor told me to go to a mental hospital for 3 months. And you can kind of imagine if someone told you that. You'd wonder what's wrong. But I kind of knew something was terribly wrong. So I went. And I had 2 counselors. And the first one helped me to uncover my abuse. Sorry. Oh, Ned was my first counselor, and he helped me uncover the abuse. He kept on me because I sort of remembered the green uniform, and I thought maybe I had been abused, but I completely denied that there had been anything sexual about it. It was too shameful to admit it. But he was a really good counselor, and he just kept telling me and asking me questions and listening when I would cry and get upset. And then finally, I remembered the abuse, and I remembered the knife. My abuser held a knife over me. She hung it on the chandelier, and it was a big carving knife. And it really scared me. And she told me if I told anyone, she would kill me. And I believed her. And I think that's one of the main things that happens when an abuser abuses a child. They believe that the abuser will kill them or do something terrible to them. Wait just a minute. My second therapist was a psychotherapist, and without my knowing it, he hypnotized me. And that was a really good thing because I could draw back from what was being said, and I wasn't judging it. And I wasn't thinking, oh, I can't tell that. I can't say that to anybody. And Alan came out, and he started telling this psychiatrist everything that had happened. And he knows about all the other personalities. And I've heard in most cases of multiple personality disorder, there is one personality that keeps track. So he knew about the other ones, and so he would tell the psychotherapist about it. And then the psychotherapist could ask that person to come out and tell what happened to them and why they were there. All right. So while I was at the Christian Care Center, that's where I went for the therapy, I was told to keep a journal. So I would go home at night and write down what happened during the day, and I'm glad I did. But one of the things that happened was that one of my personalities wanted to write in my journal. And I was just amazed, but I could tell it was new Nancy, that she wanted to write. And it turned out when she came about, she had been in 2nd grade and she was learning to write, and she never finished 2nd grade. And she wanted to learn to write. So I let her start writing, and she writes in this sweet little 2nd grade longhand. It was really cute. It's really cute. So, many of my personalities wrote in my journal. And what I've done is I've written a book, and I've taken copies of these little things that my personalities wrote and put them in the book. And what it does is it gives you an understanding of how it actually happens that you make someone else up in your head. And my book is called Multiple: A Christian's Battle with Insanity. And it has been a battle. My book is not yet available, but I have a contact list. If you're interested in finding out when I publish my book, thank you. You can sign your name, and you're in no obligation to buy it. Just if you were interested, then when I finally get it published, I'll tell you. And I've been working on getting it published. In a few minutes, I'm going to go over the signs and symptoms of child abuse. But first, I want to know if there's any questions about my history or multiple personality disorder. Yes.
Do any of your other personalities besides Alan have co-consciousness with other personalities?
Yes. Now a lot of them do. You're supposed to be completely integrated. I'm supposed to be an integrated person, which means I'm all my personalities all the time, and none of them flee or go away. But that hasn't quite happened yet. Yes.
Do you feel that way? Do you feel like that's what's supposed to happen, or that would be better?
Yes. Because now there's still some little wars going on, especially with Tom. Just kidding. I'm not a serial killer.
Alan has trouble with me.
Yes.
Nancy, you're speaking to us about, as you created these different, how much awareness did you have at the time that you were creating this? Is that just your
None. It was amnesia all the way. I had no idea. Not even, I was 50 years old when they discovered it. So all along, I didn't know. I knew I was crazy and there was something really wrong, but I didn't know what it was. Yes.
Can you talk to your personalities, or can the personalities talk to each other?
Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to demonstrate. Yes?
Do you have an image in your mind as to what each of them looks like?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so in your mind, or in their minds, they do not look like you?
No.
You don't see their face?
Alan especially does not like to admit that he's me. I'm a little old lady. He does not want that. He wants to be 8 years old and do fun things, none of which I can do. Yes?
Nancy, are you still losing segments of time, or have you been able to control that?
I still lose segments of time. I went to the skin doctor, and he was examining my neck, and he went like this. And for some reason, it must have reminded me of my abuse, because I blanked out completely. I had no idea that he had walked around me and examined my skin. I had my clothes on. So I thought, okay, this is fine, and I went home. And then I was talking to my husband and I said, it's odd that he didn't examine me. And my husband said, he did examine you, don't you remember? And then I remembered it. But it does happen to me. I don't like it. Yes.
You said you were 15 whenever you got your actual diagnosis.
Yes.
How many people did you see before that?
All in all, I've had about 11 psychiatrists and psychologists, and 4 of them have been since I was diagnosed. So it's really hard for this therapist to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about the therapies that have been helping you? What do they involve, and what do you have to do? What's the therapist have to do?
Okay, well, the therapy I have now, he just asks me what my problems are. And usually, by the time I'm done telling him 1 or 2 problems, I realize one of my personalities is really upset. So then he or she will come out and talk to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist is amazing. He's a psychotherapist. I can't remember whether he's, well, anyway, he's the doctor.
Kate, what is it?
A psychologist?
Psychologist, okay. So he is very good at telling me and my personalities what to do. And it's perfect common sense. And I think normal people figure these things out by themselves. But I can't. Yes.
Nancy, could you tell us a little bit more about your religious conversion and how that really helped you?
Yes, it was wonderful. I was so down, and I felt like I knew I was going to go to a mental hospital. I could tell, it was just ridiculous. And I was taking all those drugs, and I couldn't get along with anybody. And then someone told me about Jesus, and I accepted him as my Lord. And when that happened, really, it was like the light came on. And everything that I did, I understood. And I started to understand other people, which I had never been able to do. And I wasn't afraid anymore. I knew he was going to take care of me. And so I had great confidence that I was going to be okay. And I still was a hippie for years after that. But eventually, the Lord kind of kept nudging me to straighten me out.
Was that sort of like an inner self-helper?
Yes.
Ish?
Yes. Like, what do they call it? Your higher power. Yes.
Do your other personalities accept Jesus too?
I think so. One of them actually had a fight with the psychologist about that. Because it was the one in Florida that was the psychotherapist, and he was hypnotizing me. And we got to this personality, Sarah, and she took most of the abuse, so she is really messed up. And he was helping her, and it was like I was going like this all the time. All the time. When I went anywhere, I was going like this. And he was talking me down, and he talked me through every reason I had why I shouldn't come down and be myself. And I can't remember any of the reasons so that I could explain it. But it's like being very, very confused, and all of a sudden you're not confused anymore. And so that's how Sarah was healed. But on the way down, I insisted that he have Sarah take Jesus as her Savior. Yes.
I have two more questions.
Okay.
Number one, are you able to bring out your personalities, or do your other personalities still have control of that?
Most of the time I can bring them out, but sometimes not. And sometimes they get mad at each other. And that's really not a good thing. It's kind of hard to deal with. But the psychologist is teaching me how to. He wants me to have conferences. And that's what we're supposed to do. When you have DID, you're supposed to have a conference from all your different identities. But it's very hard to do that. Yes?
Yeah, I was just wondering, so your 13 personalities, were they all formed from your past trauma, like when you were younger, or are you still forming them now, like even after diagnosis?
I'm still forming them. I formed one called Tarzan, which I think is stupid. Any other? Yes.
Well, and I guess my other part of that question is, when you form them, are they like all for negative reasons, or do you form them now just for other reasons?
A lot of them are formed for good reasons. Most of them are for good reasons because I need them. I have a personality, Julie, and she loves to do art and music and dancing. She loves the arts. But some of the other ones don't care about that at all. But if I didn't have her, I probably wouldn't have gone to school for interior design. Yeah.
Do you think your 13 personalities make up your own, or do you think you have your own separate personality, like your own, like Nancy, and then you have 13 others?
They tell me that I probably do have Nancy, but I'm not really sure. In fact, right now I'm Jane. And Jane is very tall and has blonde hair and doesn't mind speaking in front of people. So you can tell it's not me. Yes?
Couple things. You don't hear people talk that much about DID. I mean, I don't know why, it's not very, talked about. Is there, do you know what the percentage is of, the ratio or the percentage of people that have this DID or?
No, I don't. In fact, I think they made a mistake when they changed it to DID. Because DID does not describe multiple personality disorder. So the way they have it listed in the DSM, I think it says dissociative identity disorder, which can have a diagnosis of multiple personality disorder. So I'm not in agreement with it at all. I mean, they've included a whole bunch of things in with dissociative identity disorder. Shamanism is one of them. It's kind of strange.
Your third husband, you spoke briefly about your third husband. Did he understand that you had the different personalities, and was he good about it?
Yes, he was wonderful. He understood. I went home and said, I found new Nancy. And he suggested that I get a coloring book. So we went to the store and got a coloring book. But new Nancy was afraid to go. So she stayed home, and when we got home, she colored in the book.
Nancy, when we talked, you were talking about how with your psychologist, you actually have these conferences. Could you describe the conferences a little bit?
Well, I've never really had a conference with him. It's usually been one-on-one with him.
Well, no, I mean with the personalities.
What I have to do, I hate to tell this, what I have to do is get a big room and put 13 chairs around and put signs on each one of them, who's who, because I can't keep track of them. So that's kind of weird. Yes.
Some people do better with small conferences with a few.
Yeah, there you go.
A few at once.
Hey, good idea.
Also, one of the reasons I think that it doesn't get diagnosed very much is because people don't believe it so much. And
Yeah,
so
that's
a lot of
really
people who
true.
have it are really good at hiding it when they're at therapists because they're afraid they're not going to be believed.
That's true.
And also, I would think, the fact that you have complete amnesia about the event. So you wouldn't know you had it. You're just acting strange, right?
Yes.
Was medication ever part of your treatment?
Oh, yes. It still is. Yes.
Nancy, is the goal to understand your multiple personalities or to try to unify them into make them one person?
It's both. I'm supposed to be unifying them.
Does it matter to you?
Yes, because if I unify them, they'll work out their differences. But I'm not sure that, I don't know whether I can or not. Just, yes.
I mean, were there events in your life? I mean, it sounds like you definitely had some pretty big milestones, you know, marriage, birth, and college and things like this. Were there events in your life that sort of forced conferences? Like I would imagine, you know, if you were having a child, like, were they all there? I mean, how frightening was it for an 8-year-old to give birth? Especially boys.
Good question. I think Alan probably avoided the whole situation. I don't think he would stay around for that. And no, they couldn't have conferences because they didn't know about each other until the therapy started. Yes.
I just wanted to say that I have a loved one with DID, and they have found that having conferences, smaller conferences between a few personalities and learning to get along has made them very functional and not feel the need for integration and feel like there's enough. Yeah, they feel like there's enough coherence and ability to communicate with each other that they can manage their life really well and
I'll have
feel
to try that for sure.
very good about
Sounds
it.
good.
Yeah,
I've
even
heard
without
other-
integration.
Sorry. I've heard that if you integrate or try to have them in small groups instead of looking at it as I need to get all of these 13 to agree upon things, if you link together the ones who are more similar, I think that.
That's a good idea. I think it's a great idea. I'll come back in a year and tell you how it worked. Yes.
Can you ever, like, the 13 personalities, obviously they have different personalities. Can you ever choose to bring, like, well, this one would be really helpful right now, you know, I need her, and then you can bring her, call her.
Yes,
or
that's how I
something?
got Jane here to do this talk. I have to just concentrate and then she'll come in and do it.
Well, she's doing a great job.
Thank you. Yes.
Sounds like you really went through a lot. I'm sorry it took so long for them to ultimately diagnose you.
Thank you.
Because of that, did you develop any other mental illnesses, like depression, anxiety?
Yes.
I
Yes.
mean,
Yes. Yeah, I'm on antidepressants now. The doctor told me that I had no happiness hormones. They had been killed. So the medicine works really well. Yeah.
Do you want to be integrated?
Not all of me wants to be integrated. That's a good question. Did I mention Sarah before? She does not want to integrate. She took so much abuse that she is curled up in a box, and she does not want to come out because she's so ugly that she can't stand to have people see her, because she just was abused until she thought she was, I don't know what. So she does not want to integrate, but we're working on it.
She saved you from that horrible experience.
I know, she did. She took
She
the
took it,
abuse.
yeah.
She's a very good girl. I hope she's listening. Yes.
Do you have different, do you dream in different personalities? Like, does Alan have dreams and then Sarah has her own dreams? Or do you have, like, multiple personalities in your dreams? I don't know if that's, I don't even know if you remember your dreams.
I think sometimes one personality will dream about another one, but I can't really tell what's going on when I dream. I think all of them dream, and they may all dream different dreams, but I'm not sure if they really communicate with each other about it. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, I was just curious, I mean, what is your relationship with your children, your daughters? And do they understand now your, or should I bring that up?
Well, I had two daughters. The oldest one told me recently that she left the house as soon as she could, but she waited till she was in college. She went to OU, but I didn't know that about her. But she's a really sweet girl. Then I had a younger daughter who was with me more during the time when I was really crazy. She just has a terrible time. She's finally getting her feet on the ground. She's 38 years old. She had a lot of trouble. She was an alcoholic for a while, then she took drugs, and then she was an alcoholic again. And I guess it's because my ability to relate to her was just terrible. So, any other questions? Yes.
How old were you when the screen woman was finally physically out of your life?
I'd say 6. So she managed to do a lot of damage in just 2 years.
Yeah.
But when I think about her, I kind of feel sorry for her, because I figure her mother did it to her. And so she never got away from it. And that's why she was a juvenile delinquent. I didn't tell you that part, did I? I forgot. Sorry. She came from the Gumbert School for Wayward Girls, which then was a place for juvenile delinquents and girls that were sexually doing things when they were too young that they weren't supposed to. And they were locked up. So I don't know how it managed to happen that she was in my house sleeping in the next room. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And now people wouldn't do that. People know better. Yes.
I'm sorry. Like, you've got Jane is doing this, Jane is talking and presenting and stuff. When if you, like, if some of the other personalities try to come in, you're really concentrating a lot and doing a really good cohesive job of presenting all of your information and focusing. Other ones, they may be trying to come in at times. And how are you able to stay within that one personality that's working and get the other ones to, like, get out of there?
Well, I would say I have control over it. So they can't actually come in unless I let them. but some of them don't want to come in, so that's their decision. Yes.
Do you know other people with DID, or do you have any community with multiple personalities?
Yes, I do know several people that have it, and they have also had very chaotic, hard times in their life.
Is it comforting to know other people that have had it?
Yes, very comforting. Yes.
Were you able to forgive your abuser?
I've tried. I think I have, but sometimes I get really mad anyway. Yes?
Are you ever lonely?
Oh, yeah. It seems funny to be lonely when you have 13 personalities. Yeah, I get very depressed. If I didn't have my medication, I wouldn't be here talking. Well, I'd like to spend a few minutes telling you about the signs of child abuse. So just a second. I've made up these little cards, and they have all the symptoms that I know about of child abuse. So if you would like to take one, you can take it with you and keep it in your purse. And if you see someone that you think is abusing their child, you can look at the thing and see if that's really a symptom or not. But the main thing to know about identifying child abuse is never confront the abuser or the child. Because what will happen is the abuser will take the child home and do everything short of killing it. Because the abuser does not want to be found out. The first symptom, and I believe the most important one, is a dramatic change in behavior. And people don't think of that. But if you know a child who is usually friendly and calm, and suddenly they're loud and aggressive, that's a sign maybe something's wrong. An obedient child could be rebellious. A calm child could be frightened or jittery, but it's the change that signals something might be going on. Observable injuries are obvious. They're burns, bruises, broken bones. Also included is bite marks, swelling, and discolorations of the skin. And I think that you should ask the child. If you see a child, you're not saying, I think you're abusing your child. You're just asking them what's wrong. And that's polite to do in our society. If you see someone with a broken arm, you say, oh, what happened to your arm? And if you do that, you can tell kind of if the adult suddenly sweeps the child out of the way and says, oh, he fell. You kind of know maybe something's going on.
Nancy?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get a hold of somebody if something like that's happening? I mean, you can't, I mean, by the time you call somebody, and what do you report, and how do they find that?
I know, that's the problem, is if you see them at the playground,
right,
you kind of almost have to be a spy in order to figure out where they live. I guess you could try to see if they have a car and look at the license plate.
But if they don't, then they just sweep the kid away and you have no idea.
I know. There's nothing you could do. You could say a prayer, I guess, for the little kid. Difficulty walking or sitting is another sign, and that could be sexual abuse happening. And all abused children have one universal symptom. They will be afraid of their abuser. And they you may notice that that they don't really want to be around a certain person. My daughter, the one that lives in California, the older one, she has twins and she lives in LA, and they go to school, and one of the little boys at the school suddenly turned from a sweet little nice guy into a monster. And he was screaming and beating people up and just throwing fits all the time. And I could tell that someone's abusing him, but I had no way of communicating that because it was in LA. But that's a sign that something's wrong. A defensive stance is like this, like you're trying to defend yourself even when no one's doing anything to you. And the children may flinch if you would touch them unexpectedly. And they might appear watchful and alert, like they're waiting for something to happen. Lack of personal hygiene shows neglect. And that doesn't always mean abuse, but it definitely means neglect. But I don't know if anyone would want to report just on neglect. A return to earlier behaviors is one of the symptoms, like if the child is older and suddenly they start sucking their thumb or wetting the bed or stuttering, that can be a sign that something's wrong. Risk-taking behaviors is another sign. They might run across the street without looking or jump off the top of a jungle gym because they're silently asking for help. They don't care about themselves anymore. Their self-esteem goes away when they're abused. And so they just don't care what they do. Torn clothing or bloody underwear is one of the symptoms. And that's really serious. If you see a child with that, you should probably take them to the doctor. Because if you do, and then they're reported that that child has been abused, the doctor's statement would show that it was legal. I don't know how to say it. Explicit language. A young child who suddenly spouts sexual language may be someone is teaching them that language. And inappropriate sexual behavior is the other one. And they might try to victimize their peers or a younger sibling. If you notice 2 or more of these signs or symptoms, and you think abuse may be taking place, never confront the caregiver or the child. What you want to do is call the abuse hotline, and I put it on the cards. And you can't say for sure that anything's going to be done about it, but you can at least report it if you know a name or an address. That might help. And you do not need to give your name if you report someone, and you do not need proof anymore. You don't have to have any proof. And the best thing you can do to protect your child from abuse is to talk to them about their bodies and teach them the real names of their private parts. And we've had such a feeling that we can't do that, but we need to. And explain to them that they can talk to you about it and that they shouldn't let anyone else look at or touch their private parts except the caregiver or the doctor. And teach them it's okay to say no, and that the child should tell a trusted adult right away. And I really wish they had known this when I was young. been very convenient. Okay, that's all the signs. Yes.
I'm sorry, if a kid is being neglected and there's like the poor school attendance and the lack of personal hygiene once they get to school, even preschool, do you think, how likely is it that the teacher, whatever, would get involved and, you know, confront the parents or whatever? I mean,
She doesn't want to confront them. She should report.
By law, if the teacher is thinking that something is going on, they must report.
Yeah, it's like a part of your contract, it's part of your mandate, of course, like you have to say something if you see anything out of the ordinary. And CPS has to do a child visit, like a home visit, if anything's reported, even if it sounds false, so then they have to check.
So the teachers can actually get involved in the situation?
They have to.
Oh.
They have to. Yeah,
Boy.
so, I mean, they could be in just as much trouble, but they would be considered neglect on their part even.
Oh, well, that's good.
They're required by law to.
Yeah.
That's very good.
School counselors, school nurses, anybody within the school district. Doctors have to, and then they reports to.
Well, that's all good. Except when you accuse someone who's really not abusing their child, and that can really have bad recriminations for the family. I've heard it can ruin families. So.
But not everything that gets reported is investigated. It goes through a process of, so if it, you should definitely report anything that you suspect, and then if they have so many, then they might investigate that. But just if you report that they don't have a coat in the winter, that may not be enough for them to go and investigate that.
Oh, I see. Okay, so they actually, there's a committee somewhere that decides?
There's children's services.
Oh, okay, so they would get involved.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a question?
I believe you can also call, like, the Community Children's Services Department versus the 800 number, like if you do see something, you can just go ahead and hold it.
I think you can.
Yeah, I know, you can be an anonymous reporter, and they respect that, you don't have to give your name.
Oh, okay, good. Well, that's good to know. Any more comments or questions? Now, don't go around saying I'm crazy.
You're a good person. Thank you.